All right. Welcome to another episode of the Seven Story Podcast. I want to give a quick shout out to those who will watch on the replay. And today we have Dennis Scheel, who is an author. Notice the theme there, right? Dennis, go ahead and introduce yourself to the would-be crowd, and we'll get started from there.
Well, I'm an indie author and I've been since 2017, though the first one that I wrote in 2016, I went back and rewrote something and got an extra editor on it to try to improve some of the things because I had some feedback on it that some of the parts needed some improvement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you like to do outside of writing? What's a day in the life like for you?
Well, mostly now it's focused on my cat that I used to have a cat and a dog, but the dog had to be put down. He was a 13 and a half year
Mm,
old French bulldog, so he had a long life. Um, but as for other hobbies, I do like to read myself and play games and watch movies and stuff like that. And I love literature as well.
okay, I gotcha. Keeping it simple.
Yeah.
All right. So, what inspired your first work? Like, what was the thing that got you into writing in the first place?
Well, I always enjoyed writing, and as a kid, many things had inspired me as I loved reading and I always loved stories. I was just never able to get that far into writing myself. So in 16, I believe it was, I've had diabetes since I was 21,
Oh,
and in 2016, I had seizure thanks to my low blood diabetes, blood sugar. And when I had that, it made me paralyzed from my cheek to my toe.
mm,
And after the recovery of that, I decided to, since I wasn't working on recovery anymore, to give it another shot. And since I hadn't ever gotten anything, I think let's just go to the extreme and do just in case. So I decided to write it in English instead, and that's the one that worked for one of the two reasons.
yeah, okay. Out of
So
curiosity, what is your native language?
Danish,
Danish?
the country everybody's talking about taking over Greenland from.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So just a little tangent question. So that experience with diabetes and being paralyzed, has that experience influenced your writing to any degree?
I don't know if I would say so per se, but everything in your life usually inspires or give you certain things to use in your story. And sure, some parts of the stuff in my life I have used in my stories, like inspiration or other points of interest that I blended into the story in some way or form. So I wouldn't say specifically, but some parts.
Okay, gotcha. So how do you so let's take it toward your story itself, the silvery path, right?
Mhm.
So how do you come up with characters? Like, are they spontaneous or are they meticulously planned?
Some of them are planned pretty much as I go through it, but while I write, sometimes I come up with ideas to use or characters, like you said. So it's a part of both. It is a mixture of both. Some of the characters are inspired by real people. Other things are the ones I come up with and have to look into names that would fit the character depending on the arc that they go through in the story.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so you base the characters' names on like their progression through the story? That's interesting.
Um, I did with a few of the characters, yes.
Oh, okay, nice. I know. I think most authors, they pick their characters' names out of a hat. They're just like, you know what? we're gonna go this one, or a name might be already in mind. It's like, yeah, you know what, we'll take this one. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting that you pick a character's name like based on their particular arc. You know. All right. So, what are some of your favorite genres to read?
Well, I kind of like the same genre that I do write in myself with science fiction and fantasy. That is a genre I find fascinating. There are many
Hmm.
things you can do about in them. And again, the thing I like the most is the thing that blends genres. It's not that I only read science fiction and fantasy. I mean, the ones that I got the most inspiration from was from when I was a kid. So that was be young adult stories that I read back then.
Okay. And what was one story that like inspired you? Like, if you can remember the title or anything like that.
Charmed Life. It's a children's fantasy story
Okay.
about
Uh,
kid that has quote 7 lives, and he is indebted. He is inherited as a witch in quote. The gift of that, and there is it's continuing with a world that has several dimensions. There is one Questomanchi that is ruling over it all, like a monitor thing, like arbiter thing that watches everything.
okay.
So that story has inspired a lot.
Okay. Okay. So, are there any books that you recommend to, first time readers or people looking for something new?
Well, first time readers, I would not say that Charmed Life would be a bad thing. Again, if you're a first time reader, especially if English isn't your first and if it's not translated, and I think that one's translated to a lot, but if you're reading, for example, English and English isn't your first language, then it's a good thing to read something that's more geared towards a younger audience because they won't necessarily use too complex word choices for them.
Okay. Okay. I got you. Got you. So, what's the most difficult thing about being a writer, in your opinion?
It depends on what you mean by a writer. If you mean a writer like in the traditional sense or an indie writer, an indie author.
Okay. We'll go with being an indie author.
Indie author is getting your name out there, to getting your advertisement or advertisements. Those are the hardest things to do.
Okay. So, you find the writing process as an indie author fairly easy?
I wouldn't necessarily call it easy, but I wouldn't call it hard either. It depends
Oh,
on for me, it depends on where I am in the story. If I'm at this really good point where I have this idea of what I want to write, where it just seems to be working fairly well, then I have no problem writing it. On the other point, if I am at a point where I know where I need to go, but getting to that point G and H, for example, instead of A and B because it's not the beginning, then it can still be tricky to reach that because it's a really not the most intriguing point.
right. Got you. Got you. Okay. And I can relate to that a little bit. Sometimes, when you're writing a story and like the next part, but there's like a gap that you need to fill in order to get to that next part. And then, there's a couple of ways you can do it, but it's like, okay, if I do it this way, then I got to write like 10 extra pages to like make it fit appropriately.
Yeah,
Or I
yeah,
can
yeah.
just go this way where I could write 3 pages, but then that's gonna leave a gap that I'll have to address in the next series. And then, like then it comes all those tricky factors. So yeah, definitely get what you're saying.
The issue with that is that you want to be careful that if you feel that it's a maybe a boring section or an uninteresting section or whatever you want to call it, that section that you're writing to reach the next point, you don't want it to be too in quote dull because the reader would maybe feel that if that's how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So there's that. And an edit one of my editors once told me a line that because I was finishing the book and he was editing at the end of the story, and he said I should be careful not to rush it because you know you're getting so close to the end that you just want to finish it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I definitely remember, finishing up my first novel where it's like I was like, okay, I'm gonna finish this story, and then ended up doing like an 11-hour stretch where it's like just all day, just like writing it, and just like getting to the end. And like part of it for me, I could say it was a little bit rushed, but not because I was, coming up with things impromptu or prematurely, but because my thoughts were going faster than I was typing, and I was trying to catch up with my thoughts and to
Mm.
just like, try to contextualize it to where it makes sense, and then it could like, flow to its natural conclusion. So yeah, that is tricky, like when you're right at the end, you're right there, and you just kind of want to the end, but it's like, no, there needs to
Yeah.
be a resolution first, you know.
Yeah. But I think what he meant was that as you're writing the end, but that you want to get to, so not skip certain points.
Yeah,
You still need to have it feel like the rest of the story, where you're building up certain things to reach certain points. That you're not just rushing at the end, where everything's just compact and happens in one page at the
right.
end. I think that's what he meant.
Okay, I got you. Okay. Okay. Got you. Oh, okay. So, like, what's your process to completing a novel from outline to final product?
Well, I don't usually. How I put it is, my version of an outline isn't something that's written in stone. It's usually just a few keynotes. Again, the one I'm working on now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, so I really spent a little extra time on the outline because I wasn't sure that I would have enough material for one more. But as I wrote what I would need to do to continue the last one, then I realized there was a fair amount of events in it. So it's like my outline is not like where some people that write. I've heard stories about people having like a 7-page outline. I would never imagine something like that. My
Yeah.
outline is like 2 pages of a 10 font, so it's not extremely long, but it's not short either. So I don't have an outline per chapter as some people do, because I believe very strongly that, in my view, that the outline, to me, it feels like I'm limiting myself if I'm locking myself to an outline. If I'm saying that this is the outline, it has to be like this, and there's no other versions. It can never be anything else. So anything I write in a story, I like where as I write it beyond, if I get extra ideas or different ideas, or feel that this little idea that I put in the outline isn't gonna work, so I don't want to use it.
Okay, I got
So
you.
that's how I work.
Okay. Yeah, like, yeah, I have heard of that too, where people will have these, meticulous outlines that, pretty much look like a movie script for the book.
Mm,
It's like, you got to write the book, right? It's just,
mm.
oh man, it's yeah. Uh, I mean, personally, I don't use an outline at all. Like, I just start writing. Yeah, most people will be find that to be like anathema. It's like, what? Like you just have so no plot, no anything. You just yeah, I just dive in. You know.
Well, the reason I wouldn't want to do that myself is
Yeah.
because I still want to have like a basic thing.
Right.
Like, am I going to write something and I have no idea what it's going to be about? I still
Yeah.
would want to at least have a basic base baseline. I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Like to each their own. I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess I'm just comfortable in uncertainty when it comes to like I don't mind not knowing what's gonna happen. I don't know. I
Mm.
just believe that this is just me personally that stories are, they're most pure when the author doesn't try to like interfere with what's naturally going to come out. That's just me. That's just me personally. That is not a metric. That's not, rule or anything like that. I
But
just
it's
like,
a good point of view.
yeah,
It's a good point of view to have. But again, like you just said, everybody writes in a different way. Everybody has a different system. Nobody's exactly the same.
right, gotcha. So, okay, maybe this will apply, maybe this won't, but it's always a fun ask. So, what would be the most unhinged or controversial thing you've written in your novel? Don't worry, we don't judge here. Yeah.
Uh, it could be hard to say. It could be because I could gather from different points of view to answer that question. For example, if it would be plot wise, it would be probably be certain people's stats, important characters or something. But if I would go for anything, if it's too in quote graphic, then it would probably be that the concept I have in my books, which is a series, is the concept of in order to kill a soul. And again, I took this inspiration from the prophecy movies, if you've ever heard of them,
Okay.
where you have to, in order to kill an angel, you have to whip out the hearts. So I took that to a step further and said you still have to whip out their beating heart right before they're dead. So it still has to be beating. And then you either have to like crush it, like squash it or stomp on it or something, and then the soul just perishes with the body.
Oh,
Or, and this is the most graphic part of it,
okay.
or you can take a bite out of the heart to devour the soul energy of the one you're killing.
Ah, okay. Got you. Got you. Okay. Okay. I can see that being an anime of some sort. Yeah,
Well,
because
that was the thought I had. I could go with 3-point step. The third step would be that the idea in my story is something that I've had since I was a little kid. I always thought of this idea, and I always thought it intriguing because in Danish, in Denmark, we usually have an hour each week for religion. And in those religion, we don't necessarily just hear about one religion. We go to Christianity first, and then we go to the Norwegian god, the Norse gods, and other religions like the Muslim things. I think they mentioned also. Again, it's so long ago now, but as I went through all of these stories, and especially heard the stories in Norse mythology, where Thor got dressed up as a woman to try to trick Loki. And the teacher very much described at this point, they were more almost making fun of him because they were starting to move away from the religion. And then it made me think of something. It made me think of that makes it, if you look at a book, the one thing in a book you don't want is inconsistency. So in a story, Norse mythology, or even Christianity, there is so many contradictions in these stories. There's so many things that just if it was written as a novel and an editor looked at it, they would tell you there's way too many inconsistencies in this.
right,
For example, the God about being all forgiving, and then you have the thing where he kills everybody in a flood. There are
right,
very many inconsistencies. So the idea I had of this were to put like a focus on the fact about divinity, about that they are not that they could be flawed too by this story. Again, my story doesn't actually contain the actual stories in any of the religion, but it does take liberties on those.
okay, okay. I got you. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, but I've heard people say that in the past, where in religious stories there are inconsistencies,
Mm.
which kind of leaves things open to interpretation, and no interpretations are the same. So it's like what really happened. So, all right, okay, I like that. So, what's one thing about being a writer that frustrates you? Like where you just get to a point where you realize you have to step away from the computer for a little bit.
Well, if I'd had to step away, then I presume you mean if I would be like, if I had my mind something I really wanted to write in that moment, but I just couldn't right now because if life gets in something else you need to do, that could frustrate. And again, if that was would to be come up, then I would probably need to write like a little note of reminding myself what to do next time I get to it.
Okay, all right.
Or it could be like if I'm doing something, like if I'm out walking, or if I'm trying to go fall asleep and an idea just plops into my head. Usually, if you don't make a note about them, they'll be gone. And if you really like the idea, then I need to write it down somewhere, which I did in the beginning. But as the years passed, that just takes too long, especially if I'm out walking where I need to get to somewhere fast, or I'm really trying to fall asleep. You don't want to spend like 20 minutes writing down notes. So I usually just send a voice clip on my phone, either to myself over Messenger, or I record it and save it on the phone.
Okay, got you. All right. All right, cool, calm, and collected. Got the solutions. I like that. Most people most people have points where they're just like, oh God, you know. All right.
Well,
So, but
there is the thing. I heard one comment, Stephen King, I presume you know who that is.
yeah,
Yeah. Where he commented the fact that if you get an idea and you forget it the next day, it's not valuable enough to remember.
right.
And I can see his point. I just don't agree with it.
Ah,
Because again, in my view, that's not how the mind works necessarily. And it can if the idea is really strong. But again, the idea can still be good. It just can't be something that's big enough to remember. Again, it depends on the execution, in my view,
okay.
how you
Oh
use
yeah.
the idea.
Oh yeah. He stated that in his book on writing. And
Hmm.
a lot
Yeah, I
of
think it's
uh yeah, I mean, well, I agree with his point, like that, because that's just my disposition on the matter. Uh because my recent novel that I published, I started writing that in college, and I was going through semesters and stuff like that. And I never wrote it down, but it it came to me as a name, like, it's called The Adventures of Fleeting Grace. And then,
mm,
the name Fleeting Grace just stuck around and stuck around and stuck around until I was like, you know what? Let me start writing it, So like his point that he made, I actually experienced it. So I'd be inclined to agree with it. But everybody has their own viewpoints on the matter though.
well,
But
I can see the point in that though, because again, the idea that I had for my story is the
mm-hmm,
first one, which even in Denmark, it's very common that you learn a second language really young.
mm-hmm,
So I learned English really young. So in Denmark, the phrase between half Danish and half English is called Danglish.
mm-hmm.
And so I was already thinking in my head the ideas of these stories, what to call it. So I always had the idea, No Way Back, as the beginning, as a title, which is again what ended up being the actual title of the first book.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I can also see the point of it working in some cases.
Right. Right. All right. Got the last question right here. So describe your writing journey. If you had to write a story centered around it, do you think you could pull it off?
You mean in the extent that I would be writing about how my own writing work journey was? Is that what
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah.
No. I already tried writing something about myself. I cannot do it on myself. No. Before I started this first story, when I did the last attempt of it, I started by writing about my issues while I had that thing where I was paralyzed. I
Yeah.
tried to do that. I got nowhere past the first page. No, I am never going to be able to do that. I can, however, and this is not a novel, so this is very different, but I can write poetry about stuff like that. But as a
Yeah.
full story, no way in. No,
I like how definitive that answer was. He just said,
nope.
no, no, yeah, it's not gonna happen. Tried it, didn't work. Yeah, we're done. Oh man. All right. So we got about a couple minutes left. So this is where you get to promote yourself, promote your story, social media where people can find you and other things of that nature, and we'll wrap it up from there. So take it away.
Okay, I have 4 books: Nowhere Back, Taken with a Dark Desire, Rejecting Destiny. I really like the title of that. And as you mentioned, The Silver Repaired. And I am on Instagram and I am on Threads with the name Dennis Scheel. And I have a site, dennisscheel.com. And I believe, and I'm working on the 5th one in the series, because
Oh,
I decided to do a 5th one because I couldn't really finish the other thing I was working on because that thing with my dog. So I decided to go back to what I'm really good at,
right.
finishing the story that still to some extent I didn't feel like was 100% finished. And I tried writing the what do you call it? The thing in the beginning.
Oh, well, I mean the resolution.
Oh, the
Uh,
thing we do before we start.
you mean the prologue?
No, I don't remember what that is. I was trying to make the stuff of what to do in what that would happen in the story, to write that down. How many, if there would be enough material for a 5th book.
Oh, outline.
And outline, that's the word.
Okay,
Sorry,
gotcha.
outline. Yes, I was trying to write that out if there would be enough material, and I realized there would be enough, and I had more ideas since then. So it fit to write a 5th one.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming down here and interviewing with us at Seven Story Publishing. I'd like to thank the one person that was watching in and out. We love you, and we'll see you in the next interview. And I believe that's it for this one. So,
Okay.
guys, go follow Dennis Shield on Instagram and Threads, and visit his website on dennisshield.com. Again, that is www.dennisshield.com. And that's a wrap, folks. See you on the flip side.